Today's video is one that I'm recording for myself just as much as I'm recording it for you. I always have been kind of gear oriented. I always wanted to own more things, better equipment, be it audio, video, or otherwise. Even now, looking at my Amazon wish list, I have the Zoom F6, I have Octava microphones for better sound in different kinds of scenarios. I have the DJI Mavic Mini for drone shots, the Canon EOS R5, of course, because that's like everybody's dream right now, the 15 to 35mm lens from Canon for the RF mount, as well as the 70-200, that's just for photography, the other one for landscape as well as vlogging. Then I also have a stabilizer on there, LED lights for the studio, all these things, while also asking myself, why? Now I started to ask myself this question more now with the new apartment, because there's a lot of space and I could just build this studio out to be the perfect studio. To have the audio from people like Jon Olsson, who uses the Octava in his studio, to have the professional Aperture 120D LED light dome with a big Octa box, to have that shining on me to make this a perfect studio, have the F6 so my audio can be recorded without ever clipping, and even doing that for podcasts. So the possibilities and the reasonings for those different things are endless. And the possibilities to build this into this room that I have right here are endless as well. But with all of that, I asked myself, where did my desire for minimalism go? What about the essentials and just working with those? Can I make things happen with what I have without needing more and different things? And that got me to this exploration right here. As you probably already figured based on this video, I have a huge wish list of things, and it's not necessarily cheap things. So it's not just like, yeah, you can get that $5 coffee or something. It's just really, really expensive. And looking at that, it is kind of intimidating. Now, if you already also watched my other videos on goals reports and stuff like that I did earlier this year, it's also not necessarily in my best interest to just splurge on all kinds of equipment, because I also have goals of saving money up for retirement, building a certain passive income base, and those kind of dreams. So how do these two things fit together? For the most part, one of the things I could just go toward is I already have pretty much everything I need. I have lights, I have a huge room, I have a microphone that I really like, I even have podcast equipment that I'm currently not using, and I also have the Canon EOS R with the RF 24 to 105mm with an f4.0, as well as the 35mm from Canon for macro, as well as those 1.8 aperture shots with a nice blurrier background. I even have my monitor right there, which is the Atomos Ninja V, that helps me monitor myself, record myself in even higher quality and with ProRes files so that I can work with them easier on my computer, which is a big computer because the MacBook Pro from a couple years ago really spec'd out pretty much to a faster CPU and more RAM. And I have an ultra-wide monitor, standing desk, and now thanks to my parents, for my birthday I also got this chair now for this environment here. So all of that is one aspect. Another aspect is that I constantly see creators on YouTube, Instagram, as well as TikTok create with the easiest things possible. Many just use their phones, and some don't even have the latest iPhone or something like that. So that actually works. Most of those don't use any special lights. They don't even use any other microphones other than the built-in microphone. With those tools, they do live streams, create TikToks, and go viral. Many people actually use those exact tools to create YouTube videos. And granted, you can actually record 4K video on this device. And with a little magic, which I'm going to talk about in tomorrow's video, I'm also able to even have much better audio just with exactly the same device. So how does that work? Some people just go out there and create with whatever they have, with the easiest tools possible, without giving a about the quality of the video or the codec that is used behind the scenes, or downscaling, oversampling, and anything like that. Where is that other part of that desire, and why is it happening, and how can I navigate it better? So it's pretty clear there are tons of people out there who use less gear and less expensive equipment to make their videos than, for example, I do right here. Maybe you're in the same position, or you have those tools that those people use, and that pretty much is enough. Because at the end of the day, really looking into it, to me, it sounds like and looks like most of the importance comes from the content, the information that you're sharing, and having decent quality. But again, decent quality also means just your phone. Just like Nicole with her yoga videos, for example, and she's doing those in German, so I'm going to link those below. And if you are interested, you can have a look. She's recording most of those videos with her iPhone and the Rode Wireless Go as a microphone set. And that really works. There are people who watch those yoga classes, they have a great experience, and they get the information. Even though the depth of field might not be as shallow as possible, even though those videos aren't recorded in 4K or edited in some special way, or even with multiple cameras at once, it doesn't really matter because the story, the information, the content, that's already there, and it is nicely digestible. I have a feeling that for the most part, the gear lust is really driven by other gear lust people, having people around that are really intrigued by all kinds of different equipment. I actually noticed that with a specific YouTuber from a couple of years ago to now. And the YouTuber is Jon Olsson, who started a daily vlog a couple of years ago with Marcus Valeur, who was his filmer at the time. And for a year or two, it was really, really clear that they were super into cameras, all kinds of different equipment, drones, big drones, small drones, big cameras, small cameras. At one point, they were filming their vlogs with a red Epic or Red Dragon camera, which cost like $40,000. And that's insane. Now, looking at the last 2 years of those vlogs from Jon Olsson, and now his filmer for those 2 years was Benjamin Ortega, it was really noticeable, that shift away from the gear lust toward something different. And that something different was they didn't really talk about what equipment they were using. They don't lug around the huge cameras. They don't really carry around the huge drones anymore. They use what is good for the job, and that gets it done. And that really inspired me to look at that again and ask myself, what am I doing? Who am I running after here? And is it even important to do that? I do think that there's a great place for people who are on that forefront, who are inspiring us to know more about our equipment and to set up everything perfectly and have those moments. But at the end of the day, I feel more and more drawn toward making out of the moment, making with less equipment, being more minimalistic again to achieve the same result and get the information across. Even though the echo may be a little more, or maybe the audio is not as crisp, or maybe someone sounds a little more distant because I was only using one microphone instead of two microphones. Even though all the other tools, like having multiple microphones for multiple people, makes the whole editing process easier, makes the sound experience a better one, maybe it's just enough to use just one microphone. A couple more points I thought about in terms of why it might be interesting to have less equipment before I turn around a little bit, because there's still a lot there. So less stuff, what does it mean? It means less stuff in the backpack. It means less weight. And after having traveled 4 out of the last 5 years around the world with a backpack full of stuff, I now know that carrying 2 cameras, for example, everywhere I go was super annoying. Having only 2 lenses available to me also always meant that I had to choose between them or bring them both, instead of having, for example, one zoom lens. There are all kinds of reasons why this may still be a good choice, because you can say, I'm just bringing this one lens and then I'm going to crop in, or I'm just going to bring this one lens and it's going to make me more creative instead of having that ability to zoom in and out all the time. Yes, great points. But at the end of the day, if you can't limit yourself to just one thing, or you don't want to, then maybe it's just easier to have the easier equipment. Another point that I noticed over the years was, do I bring the drone? Do I bring the stabilizer? Which camera do I bring? Do I just go with the phone, or do I bring the bigger cameras? Do I want to film a vlog here, or what do I want to do? And that's not just an equipment overload in terms of the backpack, its size, as well as the weight, but it's also a mental challenge for me. At least for me, it always has this feeling of, but I have the drone. What if I don't bring it? Then I spent the money on the drone for nothing, and then I don't get the shots that I could get. But actually, I now want to just have that one hike with less weight and only bring my iPhone, for example, to actually just have a very nice experience with the walk instead of having to carry around all those things, make those stops in between, have those breaks where other people have to wait for me. So that's another thing to think about, the mental weight that may be lifted by having less stuff. And last but not least on this list of things to consider before purchasing something new is there's also more stuff that can break if you have more stuff. For example, I had this experience just yesterday, and I mentioned it in my Insta story, when a specific connection between my camera, having that connected to HDMI and then to my Atomos recorder, and then the microphone connected through an extension cord to the Atomos recorder. I recorded my video, everything was fine, and then I looked at the footage and I have a constant static there, and I could scrap the whole thing because I couldn't use any of it. What could I have done differently? Well, maybe I should have just recorded with the camera, with the microphone plugged into the camera, as I know that it works, and that's that. There's less components, there's less stuff that can go wrong if you have what you need, if you have that one setup that you know it works, and you don't have to fiddle around with it. For me, it actually took a couple hours to actually figure out which part of that chain was the issue so that I now know how I can move forward in the future. And that's not a simple thing. Like, that really is annoying. That really is crazy that that was necessary. And it wouldn't have been necessary if I just know camera, microphone, standing there, that's it. Now let's take this from the other side, because there is certainly a lot of good reasons to upgrade as well. But maybe it's time to rethink some of them. A couple thoughts that come to my mind, for example, is that having more tools or different kinds of tools also open up more doors in terms of the possibilities that you have for yourself in terms of your creation. One of the most notable examples for myself was the drone that I owned a couple years ago, which was the DJI Mavic Pro. The first version of that, actually, which I pre-ordered, then got, then traveled around the world with for a year and a half, and then I sold it. That tool really opened up a whole new perspective, quite literally, because I could finally get off the ground, high into the air, and take shots that wouldn't have been possible before. The same thing could be said, for example, about the GoPro Max that I now own, which is a 360 camera and also on a long stick, which kind of mimics a drone in a certain regard. Of course, not quite as high as a drone could go, but it can get some of those materials. So that's one thing to think about, the ability to change your perspective, to get something that would not be otherwise possible. But you should probably start with asking whether or not your equipment can actually not get that perspective and whether or not you actually need it. From that, there's also something about having equipment that does a specific job really, really well, where maybe your existing equipment can't do that job quite as well. For example, in the world of podcasting, what comes to my mind is that you can actually spend €1,000 on even just starting to do interview podcasts. But the alternative to that is you can also just go on Amazon and buy a $60 USB microphone and use that to do Skype interviews or use Zencastr or Squadcast for that purpose. And you can just start creating from there, which is a much, much lower investment. And it's also something that you just can get started like that without having that huge investment. One other example would be to use what you already own. For example, you could use, if you already have a camera and a microphone there, why not use that camera and record your podcast with that microphone? Someone who I found on YouTube who is doing exactly that is Craig Adams, who is creating movies about his hikes around the world and also creates a podcast with kind of behind the scenes content and information about his hikes. And he uses his Rode VideoMic NTG as his podcasting mic as well as his on-camera microphone. And that's one way to double purpose one thing for different things. And I think that that's really interesting and a great way to do things. And the main point about this is maybe you just get your feet wet first before jumping in and investing in a whole bunch of gear. I know I am guilty of that myself. I have done a handful of podcasts that I probably could have done with just the gear that I already owned, but I invested in the Zoom H 5, I think it's the audio recorder, and then also the Shure Beta 57A, which are great podcast microphones, and I love them. I don't think that I got my money's worth out of that creation until now. Maybe that changes in the future. And it's pretty clear that it actually is possible to work with whatever you have. I see it all the time on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, whatever. There are people out there who are doing interviews just by using a phone on a stand without any extra microphones. You can also, of course, upgrade whatever you have there and step by step it, and then you can grow from there. But you can also just have a look at what people actually want to see. Maybe you can even get a sponsor for a podcast before you upgrade your equipment. And maybe you just never need more because it is actually enough to have less and just create the information, the content, the stories that you want to create. While having this exploration, I actually found a couple of questions that I asked myself throughout that process. And some of those are, for example, the question, have I actually used my equipment to the degree that I could use it? Have I really gotten everything out of it? Or is there more to go? And most likely nowadays with phones that shoot 4K and do slow motion, we probably both have ways to go with what we already have. Another question is, am I actually trying to paint over something, some insecurity about my creation by having superior audio or superior video quality? And another point around that topic, am I just trying to block myself by saying I would need better audio or better video quality? I could start this podcast, but I need interview equipment for it. I could film that short film, but I need a better camera that shoots 8K. I could blah, blah, blah. It really is just that. And I'm absolutely 100% guilty of that myself. I have had plenty of times where I said to myself, I would like to go more on hikes, but I should really invest in a camera first to then have those hikes, because then I could create better videos from those hikes, maybe even with a drone, and then it would be worth it. But without that better camera, without that drone, the hike's not worth it, which doesn't make real sense because I could just make art with the tools that I already have and go from there. I also asked myself, what's my goal here? What am I trying to achieve? Can my equipment already do what I'm trying to achieve? Realistically, not in like a bubble sense where it's like the perfect world, but what can I already do with whatever I have? Maybe I need to step a little back with the desire. Maybe I need to make a couple of sacrifices in the quality, but could I just do it anyway? And out of that, another thing about the business sense specifically, if you're trying to make a business out of YouTube, for example, or out of your podcast, also some interesting questions are, how long would it take to actually recoup that investment? What would it take to, or how many episodes of my podcast, how many videos would I have to produce? How much money would that need to make to actually warrant the investment? How long does it take to basically finance whatever you are trying to buy? But not just that, also the question, would your viewers actually notice the change? And also, do they really care? Do your viewers on YouTube actually care whether or not your video is in 4K or not? Yes, of course, there's a market for those kind of videos where it's like advertised as this is in 8K, this is special, and maybe you get some marketing out of that. And that's great. But the bulk of your users, do they actually care? Or is it just enough what you're already creating and they're really there for the story? With that, I actually wondered whether or not I can see in my YouTube statistics what quality level people watch my videos at. I haven't been able to find that. So if you are able to find that, or you know some place where I can look it up, please let me know in the comment section down below. Because I think that that actually would be a very interesting exploration to know what kind of quality setting my viewers watch my videos at. Is it 1080p? Is it 4K? Is it even less than that? Maybe 360 or 720? That, I think, would really be interesting to explore whether or not it's actually worth the trouble for example, publishing 4K. Even though I would desire to do that and I actually upload my videos in 4K, of course, right now with the Canon EOS R, without the 5, I can't really shoot 4K without that massive crop, which then would mean I would have to put my camera far away. So that doesn't really work. But is it even worth it to wonder about those questions? To see that in the statistics would be really interesting. But to come to a close, me and you, we are probably still going to buy gear that we don't really need. That we don't really need in the sense of it makes sense because we outgrown our system, because we need more megapixels. With the Canon EOS R5 for myself, that probably is going to be in my hands by the end of the year because I just want that 4K, the ability to shoot 4K content natively in the body and also externally, and also not even have the 8K RAW or something. That's maybe interesting, but not really. What is really interesting is the 4K 120 FPS. That's something that I'm really lusting for, as well as the 4K 60. Those two settings, to be able to completely revamp everything I do with an uncropped 4K sensor, that really is something I'm looking forward to greatly. All that in a body, in a lens system that I have already purchased into, with the plan of sticking with it. So that's something that I really look forward to. And there will be a time where I will be able to upgrade to that camera. There's the fun, there's the having something new in my hands, that creative spark that is produced by that. And I totally understand it. It's okay. It's even okay to just own something so you can have it on your shelves because you collect it. If you can afford it, of course. And maybe if it's a business expense, if it really makes sense. Personally, I'm not really that good in making that calculation of maybe I should not invest in that equipment because right now I don't even have my last one really recouped in terms of the creations that I made with them versus the money that they made. But maybe this video inspired you to think about that whole process a little longer. Maybe make a decision to not purchase certain parts. I know for myself, from my wish list on what I thought about in terms of purchasing in the next few months, I know that I reduced it a lot by removing certain aspects. For example, the Zoom F6 is no longer on my list. The Octava microphones aren't on that list anymore because I noticed I have an audio recorder, I have podcast microphones, and maybe I just work with those things. I still want a drone at some point again because having that would be really cool, and having it smaller than the previous drone that I owned would be an important part of it. I still want the Canon EOS R5 and the 1535 as well as the 7200. Like, there are still dreams and that's all still there, but it's more central on the actual moving something forward, where the new microphones are an incremental improvement of what I can do with tools that I already have that aren't really making that much of a difference, versus having something that gives me a completely new way of working with something, having a completely new ability to shoot 120 at 4K, to be able to shoot drone shots and such things. So there are still very good reasons, and I would love to hear from you what kind of reasons you give yourself to upgrade your equipment. If you are super strict and you just upgrade when it's actually necessary, when you have jobs that want more quality and you want to provide that, or if you do suffer from a certain gear lust and you just purchase something because you really want that newness, that creativity, that spark, and also those abilities that that equipment gives you. So let me know those things in the comment section down below. Let me know any other thoughts as well. And good luck. Go out there, share more, create more, see how your community, your people react to it. And from there, stepstone your way into better, more fun equipment. Have a nice day, and I will see you in the next one. Ciao, ciao.